Hello, and welcome to Key Comic Universe. Today I'm going to be talking about and giving a sort of beginning guide to how I grade comics, my recommendations for grading, and so forth. In this video, I will give you guys clear notes, clear discussion, and clear examples of different grade ranges and how I come to the grades for my own books. So, before I get into it, please like, comment, and subscribe. And if you're not already subscribed, you should definitely do so. It would be extremely helpful for me, my channel, and for giving you updates when I release new videos, and so forth. So, where to begin with the grading guide? That was my first question when I decided to start trying to make this video series. And I decided I'm just going to start off the basics. I'm going to give just an explanation of my most basic standards. So when I come into grade comics, there's a couple of reference resources I do use almost every single time just to make sure that I'm being accurate and that I'm not being misleading in my grade in any type of way. The first of which is the Overstreet Grading Guide. Now, Overstreet Guide to Grading. Now, I think this is just an amazing resource. I don't have a physical copy on me. Sorry. I have one online that I downloaded, but it doesn't really show up too well through this type of video. But that's why I use the grading information in the Overstreet Guide to Grading is extremely invaluable. Like, it will help you out a ton just with getting into grading and understanding the basics. The next reference I use is, of course, CGC. I always reference CGC when I grade. Now, you may be wondering, like, why would you reference a professional company, or why would you reference a company that, made minor mistakes in the past, and so forth? I reference CGC because typically their grades are really accurate. Now, recently, I have noticed some people bring up some concerns with CGC, but I think historically, just looking at a book in each given grade will at least give you an idea. And just look at books that people agree, hey, this is a grade, and see if it matches up with how you would grade a book. Because even CGC, they can sometimes get things wrong. So take a look at these books and be like, hey, would this be a grade that I would give this book? Or, hey, does this look accurate for this type of grade? So that's just the first two resources. Now on to my third resource. That is CBCS. I know people don't always agree with CBCS, but also people don't always agree with CGC. And I think looking at multiple grading companies and seeing what differences and similarities they have between each grade point is really important to understand, hey, how does this company grade versus another company? So that's the second thing that I think is extremely important when looking at grading. Is not just using one resource. It's like when you price comic books, buy comic books, sell comic books, whatever you may be doing. Always check more than just one place. eBay is a great resource, but I think you go out there and look at a bunch of different places. Like, you'll get way more data and way more information on, hey, this is where this all lies, and this is where this price comes from, or this is a consensus on price, or this price is different in multiple different locations. But that's more about pricing, and that could be a completely different video. And then finally, for grading references, well, actually I have two more grading references. Yes, I use a lot of references. I'm not just like a one reference person, or I only look in one place for my grades or my ideas for grading. I use just a bit of everything. Now, the next place I use is a website called Comic Grading Tool. I think they are pretty good. They're not always the most accurate for each individual grade, and they don't have everything for grading a comic. But basically, how their website works is you input the flaws into the different options on their website, and they'll basically grade your book for you. They'll basically say, hey, this is where this book lies grade-wise. Now, I haven't messed around a ton on that website to see how accurate their grading is, and sometimes I'm completely different on grading than they are. I could be like 1 or 2 points below where they're saying the grade should be at. So, it could just come down to difference of opinion, or them just not having all the options to fill out the information perfectly. But it at least gives you a rough idea. And if you're unsure on how a certain grade factors in, or if you're looking at Overstreet's guide to grading and something just doesn't make sense, you can input in there and get a visual example, as well as where they consider the grade to fall in at. And then on top of that, the other like resource that's always pretty good is, of course, at least for me. Now this could be different for other places, but I really like to check my grades with how my LCS does their grades. So my LCS, they are super clear in their grades, especially for like higher end books, because they spend a lot of time grading. The guy who runs the shop, he's an amazing grader, and I really haven't seen a grade where I'm like, wow, that is atrociously different than what I would say is. It's always within a 0.5 to exactly on where I would grade their books at. And I'm talking about bigger books, because sometimes you'll be going through a back issue bin and someone will put back a book incorrectly or messed up a book, and that does happen every once in a while. And so I can't always use their back issue bin as the most accurate. But if we're talking like their grades for the books that they keep up on the wall, or somewhere else, like, basically backroom storage, where they'll bring out more high-end book for you to take a look at. Those grades, oh my gosh, they're like dead on every single time. I always check, because I always want to make sure that we're on the same page. And every single time I'm like, wow, you guys are amazing at grading. This is just great. Now that's a bit of a rant into a bit of a tangent, but what I'm getting at is, if you trust your LCS to have accurate grades, then you can reference their grading with your own books that you bought from elsewhere, or with online books where you're looking at buying things. Next, I talked in a previous video about quick grading, and I'm not really going to talk about that here because I've already covered it. If you want to see that, go check out that video. But I really spend a lot of time grading. So the first thing I do want to grade, and I'm going to move this over just to give a little bit more room. I want to be able to visualize everything. Number one, always look over the book before you take it out. Just make sure that everything looks good. Number two, look on the inside of the book, check page quality. Page quality can change throughout a book. You have one page where it's off-white, and then you can have like the very last page be tan or yellowing. So look through the entire book. That will help out a lot. Next is just checking for obvious defects. Obvious defects always pop up because, they're obvious, like big creases, anything like that. Next is what I do as I flip over the book and look at the back cover, because I realize a lot of people I bought from, they don't flip over the book. They just look at the cover of the first few pages and they're like, yeah, this book's like a CGC 9.8 ungraded raw. And it's like, yeah, and I get the book in and it's like the back had like a huge stain, or had like just a crease or something like that. And it's like, really didn't look at the back, or do you just ignore that? Like, always make sure you analyze every single little thing before you do anything else. Analyze the whole book. Next, go through, and this has helped me out a lot, go through and note down every single defect. Like, just go through and write a note for the defects. Next, what I do is I reference these defects with grading guides, and I mentioned the resources I've used before, but I reference the grading guide and look at where everything falls. Then, after I'm done with that, well, I might do this a little bit differently than other people, but I first off look at the worst defect of the book, because that's going to be my starting line, you could say. A lot of people, I disagree with this. A lot of people start at putting their book at a 10 and saying, well, I'm just going to add in every single defect, and the book will go down from a 10. And I just say, look at the worst defect on that book, and then start there. Start the worst defect. And if it goes down from there, then it goes down from there. If it's like so many defects where it really does start affecting the overall grade. But if it doesn't, you already have done 99% of the work by just looking at that one major defect and saying, okay, here's the one major defect. And like, let's say you have like some big, huge crease on your book, right? But outside that, the book only has like, let's say, a few like very slightly blunted corners, like just super small blunting. And that is it. Well, that very small blunting really won't affect the grade at all from there, because that big, huge crease that's the one big defect. That's your big defect right there. You pretty much have already answered what the grade of your book is. So, and also it can save you time. Like if the book has a bunch of like small defects that don't really add up to anything or don't add up to a ton, like loss in grade or anything like that, you'd be inputting all the little tiny defects in and being like, well, this takes it down to 9.8, now down to 9.6, now down to 9.0, and you could spend way more time than just looking at the worst defect and going from there and deciding, well, how much more does this affect my book? And again, that is just how I do it. I found that just to be the most best way to save time. Next, and I don't think a lot of people do this, but it is something I do. So, I also, for higher end books, and I'm starting to do this more with selling as well. I used to only do this with my personal collection and stuff, but I now include what I think the grade would come back as from CGC. So this is just where I think it would come back at. The page quality, keynotes, issue number, and then any of the flaws. So this book, its only flaw is it has slight blunting. And yeah, that's it. I've looked over this book a dozen times. So that's another thing I do, is I keep double checking my books every couple weeks, every couple months. Because sometimes coming back with a fresh mind or coming back with, in your own time, coming back and double checking a book later on, it will definitely help you out with, making a more substantial final grade for the book. I've had times where I've been super excited about a book. I get in, I look it over once, and I'm like, oh yeah, this book's amazing, flawless. Not really, that's me over exaggerating, but, basically saying this book is flawless, and then just throwing it away, not looking at it, and then, oh, look, I got a better copy a few months later, and, I'm going to go sell this one as, like, a 10.0, again, over-exaggeration, but, I'm going to go sell this book as, like, a 9.0 or whatever it may be, and I don't do that, but I'm just saying, I've gone, like, where I've gotten some grades wrong, where I've initially gotten booked in, and I'm like, wow, I got that grade wrong. And I go back, make the correction to the note card, or I make a new note card, and I fix it. And I say, okay, this is the actual grade now that I've had a chance to look it over again. And that's something that I would just highly recommend, is looking over a book just more than once. I would say 2, 3, maybe even 4 times before you actually sell a book. And that's high-end books. You don't want to be doing this with your dollar bin books or your $5 bin books, or maybe even your $10 books. But once you start getting into like 40, 100, 200, 300, upwards, anything above that, you want to be 100% accurate. You don't want to send a book to someone and the person being like, hey, your grade is completely wrong. And you're like, oh, man, that sucks. I really messed that up. So, and that's one of the things I always tickle off Kieran, is giving people accurate grading. And I've actually been accused of being a bit too harsh on my grading in the past. I've had some people have gone book for me and say, hey dude, you grade this book X grade, and I think it's like 1, 2 grade points higher. And yeah, that has happened before. I've actually sold some books to some people, and they have had them graded, or they have graded them themselves, and the books have come back like 0.5 or 1 point higher than what I had it graded at. So, there can be a big difference there, because I grade it super strict, and I'll get more into that in a second, but my grading is always really strict. Now, for higher grade books, like these two right in front of you, I'm going to just also go just super quickly through some of my different graded books that I've done myself, and explain to you why I grade them this way. So, first off, Daredevil number 170. This one's, in my opinion, will come back at least a 9.6. It has white pages, and it has 0 flaws outside of slight blunting. And I mean, the blunting is almost imperceptible. You gotta get up super close and look at with your eyes squinted and be like, yeah, I can sort of see that. It's not like Blang where there's any fiber showing, or even like where it's really noticeable. The corners are sharp. It's a really beautiful looking book. And someone could argue that this book could come back a 9.8 from CGC. And it might come back a 9.8 from CGC. I wouldn't know. I'm not sending it in myself. I don't plan on that anyways at this time. But, a 9.6, this book could easily come back a bit higher. Next is Black Widow. Now, I put this one at a 9.6 plus. Now, this book, I would say will come back at 9.6. Like, this book would not come back at 9.8 or anything above a 9.6. It has, once again, super slight blunting. I have to get super squinty, but it does have like one super tiny spine tick that isn't even on the front of the book or the back of the book. It's just directly in the center of the spine, and no, not a tear or anything like that. It's just this little tiny tick, and it sucks. It does suck because that makes the book basically never come back higher than 9.6. But it's 9.6. It's not going to get any lower than that in my own personal viewpoint. But that's where I put this book, and I feel like that's just a super accurate grade on that book. Now, I also just want to mention for grading is subjective. There isn't one given rule that says this is how every single book is going to be graded, and this book is always going to come back this grade from every single grading company. There is no rule like that exists. What's more accurate to say is, how accurate can I get my grades to be to what the grading companies would say they are? Or how accurate can I get my grade to be to a general consensus on grading? So I just want to make that clear. Again, people disagree on grading all the time. Again, I've had people getting books from me or have them graded or anything like that, and the books have come back higher or come back. Well, I don't know if they come back the same. I've only had people like that where they're like, hey, bro, the book I think is way higher than what you sold to me for. Or this book came back higher than what you sold it to me for. And everyone else has just been like, yeah, your grades are accurate. So that's always good. Next, I'm going to get into what I consider a little bit lower. So a little bit more defects. So this is, I need to show the book off from the front first. This is a Flash number 197. If you just look at this book from the front, and you don't look at this book on the back, this book looks like a 9.6, 9.8 candidate. It really does from the front. It's just absolutely gorgeous. It's nice. It's a nice book. But there's a problem with this book. You see, from the front, it looks super nice. Like, all I really said was slight blunting. That was the only problem. But there's a really tiny finger crease on the back cover. So at one point or another, I'm assuming this is probably how it happened, someone lifted the book out and pressed down too hard with their finger and put a little tiny crease in it. Now, that's not the end of the world. It's narrowly imperceptible. It looks more like a dent. Well, not a dent, indent than anything else. But it's clearly, if you look close, it's a fingerprint crease. Now the book's no longer a 9.6 or 9.8 candidate or anything like that. Now, at best, in my opinion, a 9.0. Maybe if you pressed or something like that, it came back a little bit higher. But if you're someone that doesn't grade books by looking over the whole book, if you only looked at the front or the first few pages or anything like that and didn't look at the back of this book, you'd be like, oh yeah, this book's pretty much flawless. And when I bought this book, I got really lucky with this book. It was in a flash slot, and the person had a super low price on it, so I really didn't care how the books were going to show up, but the person got them bagged and boarded, and for the first day or so, I really didn't look over them. I was super backlogged at the time. But when I did get around to looking through them, the thing that I noticed with this book is the fingerprint crease. I'm like, thank God I noticed that, because otherwise I would have completely missed that. And someone would have been really upset. So, like, if they were bought this book from me, they would be like, hey, I got this book for you, and there's this fingerprint crease on the back that's not mentioned. So, yeah, and again, this is what I'm trying to do with books I'm selling. I've been going through, so for the last few weeks, I've been going through, and I've been including notes on the back of every single book. This was partly because of Comic-Con. I want my employees to be able to do everything without me having to supervise them constantly. But the other thing was, just for when I sell in the future, I did a poll, I think a few months ago, 2 months at this point, where I asked people, hey, for higher end books, do you want me to include grader notes for them? And I think it was like a 97% people said yes, or 96, 97%. So more super high. People were like, yeah, we want grader notes. So that's what I'm doing right now. And this also makes it really easy for this video, so I don't have to pull out a book or worrying about damaging a book to show this off. Now, other thing is, of course, when you do grade, you have to be really gentle. I forgot to mention this earlier, but always be gentle and don't wear gloves with your books. Don't wear gloves. Just don't. Just don't do it. Why would you wear gloves? And some people are like, well, aren't you supposed to wear like plastic gloves or even like silk gloves when you read a book? Well, there was a recent study. Well, I wouldn't even say recent at this point. It was a while ago now. But there was a study done by, I believe I'm going to look this up. So don't quote me on the exact source of this, but it was like the Smithsonian or an art institute where they said, hey, there's actually proof where if you wear gloves, you're more likely to damage a book. So don't wear gloves. Just go barehanded unless like you're cleaning / pressing, and you might be in the you might have chemicals around you that you don't want to touch your skin. Once you're doing something like that, don't wear gloves. Just when you're grading, just use your bare hands. Wash your hands. Oh yeah, wash your hands. That's huge. Wash your hands before you grade. Dry them until they're 100% dry. Because water and paper are not friends. They're not. They shouldn't be touching. No water on your comic books. Number one piece of advice. If you're not going to listen to anything else I say, don't let the water touch your comics. Okay, damn, this video is starting to get long. I should... Okay, so in future video, I guess I'll go through mid and lower grades in a future video. But for high grades, I'm just going to do this super fast, just giving a clear example. When you're grading high grade books, the book should have, at most, a few small defects that are almost negligible. I'm talking like the most tiniest of indents, the most tiniest of creases, pressable defects, stuff that's, not going to be the end of the world for your book. I'm talking stuff that doesn't affect eye appeal, doesn't affect how the book is viewed, read, seen, anything like that. When you're reading, the paper should be subtle. I can't speak. Words are hard. You want the paper to feel good, look good. You want the book to smell good. You want basically everything about the book to be really nice and really look good. And for a high grade, I consider anything high grade to be a 9.0/9.2 and up. Some people say 8.0 and up, and I would agree with that for at least like Golden Age and maybe early Silver Age. That's high grade. But I would say for 99% of comics you deal with, high grade is 9.0 and up. You can disagree with me on that. That is my personal opinion. But 9.0 and up is high grade. So just really small defects, nothing really that big. And I think the only thing you should really see across the board with any high grade book is just a really slight blunting on the book. I'm talking almost imperceptible blunting. And number two, just, if anything, almost unnoticeable spine ticks or barely noticeable spine ticks. There might be like one or two other defects that could sneak their way in if they're not end-of-the-world defects or if they're small. But that's really all you want to see on high-grade books is one of these two flaws or both of them, and for those flaws not to be major. So that's just what I look for in high-grade books. Those are some examples. And yeah, this video is long, so I'm going to end it off. And I'll come back to mid and lower grade videos and mid and lower grade books in future videos. So please like, comment, and subscribe. If you're not already subscribed, please do so. Check me out on Instagram at KeyComicUniverse. And I think my mid-grade video will also be super long, because there's a lot to talk about mid-grade. And low-grade might be just as long. In this video, this was just an introduction, and little short guide on high-grade books. So thank you for watching. Please check out more of my videos, and I'll see you guys all in the next video. Peace.